도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 APEC은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성,
포용,
개방.
신라의 정신이 APEC 2025로 이어집니다.
Welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korea's top trade negotiator returned home after high-stakes meetings in Washington as trade talks remain deadlocked. He said the main objective of his trip was to highlight key differences between South Korea and Japan in terms of their negotiations with the United States. U.S. President Donald Trump says his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin has let him down and insisted allies must stop purchasing oil from Russia to end the war in Ukraine. 7 years ago today, on September 19, 2018, the two Koreas signed a military agreement to suspend military activities near the border. We take a look at what it'll take to restore the deal after it was scrapped last year amid inter-Korean tensions. We begin this morning with South Korea's trade talks with the United States, which are at a critical crossroads with billions of dollars, auto tariffs, and even visas for workers on the line. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details on the progress made during the trade minister's most recent visit to Washington.
Minister for Trade Han-koo is back in Seoul after high-stakes talks in Washington that could reshape tariffs, investment, and even visa rules between South Korea and the United States. Speaking to reporters at Incheon Airport on Friday, he said that the main objective of the trip was to highlight key differences between Korea and Japan in terms of U.S. negotiations.
We are presenting various objective data and analysis to make clear that Japan and Korea are different, and we are doing our best to persuade the U.S. side.
Yeo's visit, which began on Monday, comes after follow-up negotiations stalled despite a major trade deal reached back in July. Under that deal, Seoul agreed to invest $350 billion in the U.S., while both sides pledged to lower tariffs on autos from 25% to 15%. But the deal has yet to be implemented. Just last week, U.S. Commerce Secretary Lutnick warned that Korea must accept the agreement or pay tariffs, signaling Washington's growing impatience. Japan, which sealed its deal earlier, committed to a larger $550 billion investment and signed a memorandum that heavily favored the U.S. in profit sharing. In exchange, Japan's auto tariffs were lowered to 15% and implemented earlier this week. Yeo emphasized the urgency of finding a quick solution.
We fully recognize the seriousness of the situation, and we are making every effort to resolve the issue as quickly as possible.
Beyond trade, Yeo pressed the U.S. to resolve a visa dispute after immigration authorities detained Korean workers at a Hyundai LG battery plant in Georgia. He wrapped up his remarks by reaffirming Seoul's stance that national interest remains the government's top priority. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Hyundai Motor President Jose Munoz says he hopes South Korea and the United States can quickly reach a follow-up trade agreement to lower U.S. tariffs on Korean-made vehicles from the current 25% to 15%. Speaking at the 2025 CEO Investor Day in New York on Thursday, Munoz noted that the company's financial guidance was based on the 25% tariff rate, but said a reduction to 15% would bring results close enough to maintain that outlook. On the recent detention and release of more than 300 South Korean workers at the Hyundai LG Energy Solution battery plant construction site in Georgia, Munoz also expressed hope for a bilateral solution on short-term technical work visas. And President Lee Jae-myung says South Korea will stand together with the United States while at the same time acknowledging that the need to manage relations with China. In an interview with Time magazine, he says Seoul can act as a bridge between the two rivals. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
South Korea will stand together with the U.S. while managing its relationship with China. That's according to South Korean President Lee Jae-myung in an interview with Time released on Thursday, saying Korea's values of democracy and market economy are based on its alliance with the U.S., but taking into account its geographical proximity and economic ties with China, it cannot sever its relationship with Beijing. He noted that South Korea can instead act as a bridge between the rival superpowers at a time of intense rivalry. In fact, U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are expected to meet in South Korea's Gyeongju next month in time for the APEC leaders meeting. The multilateral meeting comes at a complicated time when Washington is imposing sweeping tariffs against the world, against which Beijing is expected to call for an international order that it perceives as fair and just.
Probably APEC is the very good place to South Korea can have some kind of a role to play to bringing these two great powers together. But if that wouldn't be, United States and China could not come up with any kind of agreement of the trade war, and then it's very limited.
On North Korea, President Lee reaffirmed his goal to negotiate with the regime to dissuade it from pursuing its nuclear ambition, hoping to find a middle ground instead of an all-or-nothing approach. For that, he suggested halting their nuclear and missile programs as a short-term goal, followed by compensation, disarmament, and complete denuclearization as long-term goals. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
South Korean stocks are on a rally, with the benchmark Kospi climbing past 3,400 this week for the first time. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Shin Myung-gyu, Associate Professor of Economics at Yonsei University. Professor Shim, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So this week, the government scrapped its plan to lower the capital gains tax threshold for stock investors, keeping it at 5 billion Korean won, and that's about $3.6 million, I believe. So is this the main factor driving the current momentum in the stock market?
Yeah, given that there was already a rally of the Kospi index from weeks ago, the change or the stance in the government policy might not be the only main factor driving the stock price rises, but I think that can be treated as an important factor. It seems to be an important change, however, since it provides the signal that the current government, together with the president, is flexible enough to scrap the policy that it really intended to impose before. I expect that it definitely helped the market. In the business cycle theories, investors or consumer sentiments are believed to be one of the most important factors that can drive the stock market and the aggregate activity. In this sense, the stance of the government seems to relieve the market concern that it might be the kind of the anti-market government, which would contribute to the further boom. And I also want to note that the Fed rate cut which was expected even before yesterday, is also an important factor behind the rise of the KOSPI index these days.
I see. And on the campaign trail, what President Lee Jae-myung said was that he'll lift the KOSPI index to 5,000 points and get rid of the so-called Korea discount. Do you think this is a realistic goal he can achieve during his term?
I hope that the current government can remove the Korea discount as soon as possible. But whether it can be achieved that soon or not is not so sure at this point. In order to elaborate my comment, let me point out three main factors behind the discount. The first is the geographical risk. Given that investors require compensation for holding the risky assets and the probability of the war in Korea is not zero, it is not surprising that we still have the discount. And the second factor is the corporate governance structure in Korea. So it has been pointed out as one of the major problems in the Korean economy. And given that market investors put more attention on the so-called ESG, it is natural to expect that the government issue in Korea would be the factor to lower the value of the Korean stocks. And the last one is the low dividend ratio, because the dividend ratio in Korea is lower than the other competing countries, and it has also contributed to the lower stock prices in Korea. And if you think about all these factors together, I think these problems are not that easily resolved in a very few years, implying that the funds and the government need to put more efforts to change the market structure in the long run. So I think it will take some time to achieve the target, but I really hope that it can be achieved very soon.
Right. And the KOSPI also opened higher after the U.S. Central Bank lowered key interest rates yesterday, like you briefly just mentioned. And the Fed hinted at 2 more rate cuts throughout this year. How might these changes to the interest rates in the U.S. affect the South Korean stock market?
Yeah, it will definitely affect the Korean stock market, and actually as well as the other countries, maybe in the favorable direction. Stock prices might increase further for a while. Most of all, the financing costs of the U.S. investors would become lower, and the interest rate spread between the safe asset and the risky assets like the Korean stocks. And with the further expected decline in the interest rate in the U.S., the demand for the risky asset from the sort of carry trade would further increase, which can potentially raise the stock price further if there is no other changes like the geographical risk or the others as I pointed out.
I see. And looking ahead, how might the U.S. rate cut influence the Bank of Korea's decision on South Korea's interest rates?
Yeah, I believe it will help the Bank of Korea to potentially cut the interest rate. Because of the pressure from the president and not so bad inflation rate observed these days, there can be more rate cut by the Fed in the near future. And this can alleviate the concern of the BOK that the future interest rate cut in Korea might result in capital outflow due to widened interest rate gap between Korea and the US. And the inflation rate in Korea, which is the most important factor when deciding the interest rate, has been stable over the last few months. If you look at the data between June and August, the inflation rate has steadily declined from 2.2% to 1.7%, which is now below the target inflation rate of the Bank of Korea. And it seems that such trend would continue, and that gives more room for the BOK to lower the interest rate if they really think it's necessary, which can intensify the effect of the Fed rate cut on the BOK's decision.
I see. I guess we'll have to keep a close eye on the Bank of Korea's decision next month. All right, Professor Shim, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
U.S. President Donald Trump expressed disappointment over Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying he thought the Ukraine war would be the easiest to resolve because of his relationship with Putin. Meanwhile, the Russian leader announced that some 700,000 Russian troops are currently deployed to Ukraine and vowed to achieve victory. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump says Russian President Vladimir Putin has really let him down, citing stalled peace efforts as Russia's war in Ukraine drags on. Speaking to reporters on Thursday, Trump said he once thought the conflict would be the easiest to resolve because of his personal relationship with Putin.
The one that I thought would be easiest would be because of my relationship with President Putin, but he's let me down. He's really let me down. It was going to be Russia and Ukraine, but we'll see how that turns out.
He admitted that it has become his biggest disappointment, adding that he still hopes for some good news soon. Over in Moscow, President Putin announced that more than 700,000 Russian troops are now deployed in Ukraine's combat zones, and also spoke of job quotas for soldiers with government bodies.
There are more than 700,000 now on the front line, so we should choose among them. But we should choose those who are motivated and are prone to this kind of work.
Putin said while not all servicemen will see themselves as future civil servants, the Russian leader backed the idea of granting veterans additional privileges once they return home. He also stressed that achieving victory in Ukraine remains Russia's key task and highlighted demographic challenges as the next priority for his government, signaling that the war effort and domestic stability remain closely linked in his agenda. The remarks underscore two very different perspectives. President Trump voicing frustration over the lack of progress toward peace, and President Putin doubling down on a long-term campaign that continues to reshape both Ukraine and Russia's internal policies. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
7 years ago today, on September 19, 2018, the two Koreas signed a military agreement, suspending military activities near the border. But last year, the deal was scrapped under the previous administration, and now the Lee administration is seeking to restore it to ease inter-Korean tensions. Our Oh Soo-young explains what the deal entailed and what it'll take to restore it.
Signed in 2018, the September 19th Inter-Korean Military Pact aimed to lower tensions along one of the world's most heavily armed borders, the Inter-Korean Military Demarcation Line. Amid dialogue between South and North Korea, then President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un agreed to cease hostilities across land, air and sea, moving quickly to remove frontline guard posts and work towards the demilitarization of the inter-Korean border. They also banned artillery drills and large-scale field exercises near the border and created buffer zones at sea, prohibiting live fire training and naval maneuvers. In the air, the pact established no-fly zones to stop reconnaissance flights and live fire exercises. The two Koreas further agreed to work on the joint recovery of war remains and the shared use of the Han-koo River estuary. However, after the US-North Korea summit in Hanoi broke down in February 2019, Pyongyang resumed missile launches and later that year a coastal artillery drill in the West Sea, violating the Inter-Korean Pact. Tensions further rose in 2022 when 5 North Korean drones entered the South's airspace, breaking the agreement's ban on hostile aerial acts. And the North in 2023 launched a military reconnaissance satellite, violating UN Security Council resolutions. This prompted Seoul to partially suspend the no-fly zones and decide on resuming surveillance flights along the border. The next day, North Korea declared it would terminate the agreement. After the regime flew a series of trash-carrying balloons to the south, Seoul also declared an end to the agreement in June last year. While North Korea has continued to seek a nuclear state status and develop its weapons of mass destruction, South Korea's new government this year is seeking to build trust and diplomacy with Pyongyang. After a series of dovish gestures since its inauguration, President Lee Jae-myung last month ordered ministries to work towards restoring the September military agreement proactively in stages.
The essence of the pact is not so much removing the security risk, but it's the most basic safety apparatus to prevent accidental clashes or war from breaking out. so it doesn't necessarily resolve the situation, but without it, the situation is much more dangerous.
While proponents deem it an essential confidence-building and risk reduction measure, others have long voiced concerns that given the North's track record of literally blowing up deals, South Korea would only be letting its guard down. In any case, North Korea for now seems disinterested in rapprochement, particularly as it's benefiting from aiding Russia's war in Ukraine.
If the war ends quickly, North Korea-U.S. dialogue will draw closer, and the possibility of inter-Korean dialogue cannot be ruled out. However, if the negotiations to end the Ukraine war stretch on, North Korea will maintain its stance of treating the South and the U.S. as hostile states, applying pressure on the South.
While inter-Korean relations remain elusive, the fate of the dormant agreement also remains uncertain. But what's clear is that conditions on the Korean peninsula and its surrounding geopolitical environment have changed vastly over the last 7 years, making terms for military restraint that much harder to achieve and perhaps all the more necessary. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
In other news, Arirang TV hosted a special Korea Day event in New York to promote the country ahead of the President Lee Jae-myung's attendance at the UN General Assembly. The event took place on Wednesday local time at Citi Field during a Major League Baseball game between the New York Mets and the San Diego Padres. Promotional videos showcasing Korea's travel destinations and cultural heritage were shown on the stadium's large screens. Through this initiative, Arirang TV was able to introduce Korean culture to the thousands sitting in the audience. And on the cultural front, the southern port city of Busan continues to draw visitors from around the world for this year's Busan International Film Festival, with several global collaborative films with Korean movie makers. Our culture correspondent Park Gun-woo gives us a glimpse.
Made with Korea. Among hundreds of films premiering in Busan, it's easy to see how deeply Korean movie makers are involved. Not only in homegrown productions, but also through collaborations that cross borders. One standout is The Protector, the first ever Hollywood film led by a Korean production company. Premiering in Busan for the first time, the filmmakers shared their excitement about being part of such a groundbreaking project.
We're just scratching the surface of how Korean and American Hollywood productions can be made together, really work together to kind of condense the script and really get to the core, the essence of it that could really affect people on a worldwide level.
In the past few years, Korean content has become very big outside of Korea. Being able to create this story, it's an honest piece of work, and that translates to any culture.
Another buzzworthy project is Hana Korea, which depicts a North Korean defector's life through a Northern European director's perspective. The scenario was assisted by Sharon Choi, director Bong Joon-ho's translator during his Oscar win, and performed by Korean actors to deliver authenticity. The Busan International Film Festival is alive with movie fans from around the world, and they're expected to keep coming over the next few days. What are they expecting to see? Definitely more of these collaborative films, the ones made with Korea, from Hollywood to Europe.
Good for like cultural exchange and learning from each other, also in the art of movie making. Can be very beneficial too.
I really like different perspectives. It feels a bit more emotional. Just watching films in languages I don't really understand. Feels like I am appreciating like the acting.
Likewise, the Japanese hit Gokuho that surpassed 10 million viewers in Japan, the first case a Korean director has achieved such a record. And the remake of The Wedding Banquet by a Korean-American director, featuring renowned Korean actor Yoon Yo-jung, also premieres throughout the festival. With many of these intriguing collaborative projects being showcased in Busan, why not try taking this cinematic journey beyond borders, made with Korea? Park Gun-woo, Arirang News, Busan.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. U.S. President Donald Trump has publicly praised the indefinite suspension of Jimmy Kimmel Live by ABC following remarks Kimmel made about Charlie Kirk's death. Trump also said some TV networks should have their licenses taken away. ABC, owned by Disney, announced on Wednesday evening that Jimmy Kimmel Live will be suspended indefinitely after the Federal Communications Commission threatened action over Kimmel's September 15th monologue. In that monologue, Kimmel had condemned reactions by some conservatives to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, suggesting they were trying to score political points. President Trump reacted on his social media on Thursday, celebrating the suspension and calling Kimmel talentless. He also said the show had bad ratings, while urging other late-night hosts who criticized him to face similar repercussions. Meanwhile, the chairman of the FCC said broadcasters will be held accountable to the public interest. Mass protests erupted across France as hundreds of thousands of workers, union members, and citizens mobilized to reject the government's proposed budget cuts. Union leaders estimated that over 1 million people took part, while the Interior Ministry estimated that there were around 500,000 protesters and that 80,000 police officers were deployed. The protests are against an austerity plan outlined by former Prime Minister François Bayrou, which includes cuts in public spending, possible elimination of holidays, pension adjustments, and trimming benefits. Thursday's strikes follow the Block Everything anti-government protests that took place earlier and come a week after the appointment of new Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu. A United Nations Security Council resolution that demanded an immediate, permanent ceasefire in Gaza, the release of all hostages, and access to humanitarian aid deliveries was vetoed by the United States on Thursday. 14 non-U.S. members were in favor of the resolution, drafted by 10 non-permanent members, but it was blocked by the U.S. veto, the sixth time Washington has used the measure in the nearly two-year war. The U.S. justified its veto by saying the resolution failed to condemn Hamas sufficiently and did not explicitly recognize Israel's right to self-defense. London Fashion Week kicked off on Thursday and will run through September 22nd. There are 50 catwalk shows, 19 presentations, over 60 side events, and more than 150 designers participating. The British Fashion Council has taken steps to improve designer access, waiving participation fees for official schedule shows, and increasing support, particularly for emerging designers. Early highlights include the runway debut of Maximilian Rayner, who is known for using sustainable materials such as fabric scraps.
Another day, another round of rain across the country. Showers will begin on the central west coast this morning, and by tonight, the rain clouds will cover most of the country, bringing rain through tomorrow, but the east coast might see rain lingering into tomorrow night. Chungcheong-namdo province and west of Jeollabuk-do could see more than 80 millimeters of heavy rainfall. The capital region will get 10 to 40 millimeters. In terms of temperatures, it's going to be similar but breezier than yesterday in most parts of Korea, hovering in the low 20s. Seoul noticed daytime highs going down 5 degrees lower this afternoon. I mean, it was a chilly start to the day, to exaggerate a bit, and highs will only get up to 21 degrees, but Busan and Jeju will be still very warm at 28 and 30 degrees respectively. After the rain clears, morning lows could go down even further, while the refreshing weather will continue throughout the weekend.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.
해금은 두 줄로 된 한 악기인데 저도 처음에 시작하게 된 거는 그 두 줄에서 너무 다양한 소리가 나오는 게 너무 신기했고 일단 해금이 되게 사람의 목소리랑 좀 비슷하다고 많이들 하세요. 줄을 눌러서 이렇게 음을 계속 왔다 갔다 진동하는 그런 형태를 띠고 있다 보니까 애절하다라고 많이 말씀을 해주시는 것 같아요. 이 곡은 제가 좀 오래 좋아했던 친구에 대한 제 여러 감정을 담은 곡인데요. 슬펐던 마음, 혹은 뭐 고마웠던 마음, 이런 여러 가지 감정들을 한데 묶어서 마음이 담긴 곡이라고 할 수 있습니다. 현대적인 음악으로 이제 재구성하는 단계를 거칠 때 항상 중요하게 생각하는 거는 음악의 분위기를 해치지 않는 선에서는 뭔가 전통적인 주법들, 식임새, 이런 전통의 냄새라고 할까요? 맛? 이런 걸 살릴 수 있는 요소들을 좀 집어넣으려고 하는 편이에요. 저는 요새 연주하면서도 스스로가 마음도 편하고 몸도 편안한 음악들을 좀 자주 들려드리고 싶다. 제가 음악으로 위로받았던 것처럼 제가 하는 음악들로 여러분들이 좀 위로받을 수 있는 순간이 있었으면 좋겠다. 그런 무대를 만들려고 노력해야겠다라는 생각을 했던 것 같습니다.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Friday, September 19th here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Grace.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. And also Julian's with us.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we have finally made it to the end of the work week. So we're going to dive into a topic that pairs perfectly with a Friday night out. And for many people, that might mean a glass of a certain iconic drink. You see it at dinner tables and dramas, even at convenience stores. It's pretty much everywhere. So Grace, I have to ask, it's Friday and the weekend is almost here. Do you have any plans to go out for drinks tonight to celebrate making it through the end of the week? And speaking of drinks, do you happen to know what the world's best-selling spirit is?
Well, unfortunately, my ideal Friday celebration consists of a quiet night in, ordering chicken and catching up on TV shows I haven't been able to watch throughout the week. But I do know what the world's best-selling spirit is, and that is soju. It's actually held the #1 spot for 24 years in a row, and many describe it as tasting sweet at times and bitter at others, resembling the ups and downs of life.
So I'm not an avid drinker, but to people around me that are, they always say to me, the way you can enjoy soju is to appreciate that bitter and sweet side. So they're saying if you don't like soju, it means you haven't experienced the hardships of life.
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
So Julian, can you give us a sense of how popular it is? For instance, if you got every bottle sold in 1 year and lined them all up in a row, how far do you think that would go?
Yeah, well, soju is extremely popular. So if you were to stack the soju bottles sold in just 1 year, they'd be enough to circle the earth 13 times.
13 times? That's a lot. So, as you can guess, today we're going to discuss the global popularity of soju, Korea's signature alcoholic drink that's winning fans worldwide. Let's take a look at the screen to learn more. Shipments of soju, Korea's signature spirit, have seen a significant rise in recent years. Its versatility, the way it mixes easily with other drinks, along with its relatively low price, has made it appealing to many around the world. And thanks to its frequent appearances in Korean dramas and films, soju has become more than just a drink. Now it's recognized not only for its taste, but also for the sense of Korean sentiment and culture it carries, signaling that its global influence will only continue to grow. So today on News Generation, we take a closer look at how soju's status has risen and the cultural significance behind it. So as we saw in the video, it really just shows how far the drink status has risen globally, not just as a beverage, but as part of a whole cultural experience. So people around the world are enjoying it in bars, at dinner tables, and even in cocktails, embracing the rituals and flavors that make it unique. And this popularity is perhaps best illustrated by the fact that California actually established a day dedicated to soju. So Grace, can you tell us about the Soju Day?
Sure. So Soju Day is a recently established annual holiday designated as September 20th in California to celebrate and promote the popularity of Korean soju. Now, the purpose of this day is to recognize the cultural significance of soju and promote its growing presence and popularity in the United States. And it's all the more meaningful because it's not just about celebrating the popular Korean liquor, but also about learning about and appreciating diverse Korean culture, including the Korean food and other pairings that are associated with soju. While anniversaries like this lack legal force, special unofficial holidays like Ice Cream Day and Donut Day provide a great excuse to indulge in ice cream and donuts. So I hope that Soju Day will be just that.
So like you said, why it lacks legal force behind it, the designation of Soju Day was actually headed by State Senator Stephen Choi, and it was actually passed by the California State Legislature through a resolution, so that's pretty cool as well. Also, an official festival was held in Sacramento on August 25th this year. So would you want any sojus to be introduced at this festival?
Well, I think there's a lot of flavored sojus. I'm not sure if all of them are exported from Korea, so it would be really nice to like have those trending, I guess, in the US. I also like the more luxurious sojus, if I would have to say. They're more of my favorite just because it tastes cleaner, and I think that yeah, people will enjoy them abroad as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to also raise awareness that it's not just the green bottles that we often see in shows.
There's a lot of diverse sojus.
There really is. So that's really interesting. It sounds like it's not just about drinking soju, but about celebrating the food, customs, and broader culture around it. And I also love the idea that unofficial fun holidays like this give people an excuse to enjoy something they might not normally try. So, Julie, why do you think soju has become so popular internationally, so much that there's even a soju day celebrated overseas?
Yeah, well, there are several reasons why soju has gained popularity, but I think it's due to the fact that Korean popular culture and cuisine has been getting a lot of attention, which has sparked interest in Korean alcohol and drinking culture. Now, soju just isn't really as filling as beer, nor as strong as hard liquor, and it can be mixed with other various drinks, which people seem to enjoy as well. So flavored soju like yogurt soju or melon ice cream soju is also very popular overseas. Globally, our generation does tend to drink alcohol less than the older generation and tend to enjoy beverages with lower alcohol content, making soju a very particularly appealing choice.
That makes sense. Soju isn't just about the drink itself, but like we said, the whole experience around it, and it's also its mixability with other flavors and fun variations like melon soju make it really approachable, especially for the younger generation. So tell me, how do you two like to enjoy soju, and what kinds of snacks or food do you usually pair with? Grace, do you want to share first?
Yeah. Although not often, when I do get the urge to drink some soju, I like to enjoy it the more traditional way. And one popular way is to pair it with samgyeopsal or grilled pork belly, since the smoky, savory flavors of grilled meat complement soju's clean and slightly sweet profile, creating a good balance. Also, soju's neutral and smooth finish provides a very soothing counterpart to the bold, spicy, and tangy flavors of Korean stews like kimchi jjigae or kimchi stew.
So, Julian, what are your ways of drinking soju?
Yeah, well, just like Grace, I don't really drink soju that often, so I don't really have a unique pairing that I can say I would recommend, but I really do enjoy drinking soju while grilling meat at a barbecue, particularly just like what you mentioned, samgyeopsal or pork belly, and also posam too, which is more of a steamed pork dish. Anything with meat, honestly, soju just does really pair well with.
So I guess eating with meat is a popular choice, especially with pork. So now that we've explored our own perspectives, we wanted to see what our viewers think as well. To get a better sense of public opinion, we took the question to the Arirang News YouTube channel and asked how they like to drink soju. And here's what they had to say. So when it comes to enjoying soju, preferences vary. Over half of the respondents, 53% prefer it straight, while 10% like it on the rocks and 11% enjoy it as part of a cocktail. Interestingly, 26% say it doesn't matter how it's served as long as it's paired with Korean food. So this shows that while many people enjoy soju in the traditional way, there's still also a lot of flexibility, and shout outs to those people who mentioned that they like it with Korean food. So whether straight on the rocks or mixed in a cocktail, what seems to matter most is enjoying it alongside good food, especially Korean dishes. And now we're going to talk to a Korean person living in the US who will give us an insight into the popularity of soju and share how it's being enjoyed overseas. And that conversation is coming up right after the break, so stay with us.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
We're joined today by Chayuna, a Korean living in the US. Hi, Yuna. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. So I understand that you're a news producer, so you're the ideal person to give us some insight into this trend and what's kind of driving its popularity, I think. So have you noticed how people's perceptions of soju and its popularity is changing in the US?
Yeah, so I live in New York City, and New York City is a very, very vibrant city with a bunch of great bars and very diverse nightlife. And I think the popularity of soju has definitely increased over the past couple of years with the rise of Korean culture. I think soju is a lot more mainstream now. If you maybe 5 years ago, it was only in K-Town. In the Korean restaurants and bars and karaoke. Now you can find it in more mainstream liquor stores, as well as being part of bar menus. And I think that's definitely, soju is having its moment right now. And a lot of, you can find non-Koreans wanting to drink soju as well.
So Yuna, since you are in the US, which ways of drinking soju or which types of food pairings seem to be especially popular, and how does that differ from the way that soju is typically enjoyed here in Korea?
I think the biggest difference is that soju is found a lot in cocktails. So you'd be able to mix them with slushies or any type of kind of experimental cocktail soju bars. There's a lot of those. But again, you'll still always find that soju is the most popular at KBBQ. So that is definitely one of the similarities that we have in the US as Korea.
Great. So on a personal level, what are some of your favorite ways to enjoy soju? Do you have any recipes or snack pairings that you'd like to suggest for us?
I think that my favorite pairing is definitely with spicy stews. I love that kind of balance of the bitter sweet taste of soju along with the spicy. And I think even on a bigger note, I think the sharing aspect of being able to drink a bottle of soju and playing drinking games, that's kind of the best way that I personally love to drink soju and experience that culture.
Great. So thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today.
Of course. Thank you.
So we just spoke to a Korean living in the US who gave us some great insights into how soju is being enjoyed abroad, from its cultural meaning to the new ways people are drinking it. So I heard the reason behind creating Soju Day is that soju isn't seen as just a drink, but as a special symbol of Korean culture and sentiment. And Yuna kind of mentioned this as well. So what aspects of Korean culture do you think it represents, Grace?
Yeah, I think soju is kind of like the symbol of Korean 정, which could be described as that warm attachment that's felt between people who share a close relationship. Soju also embodies Korean culinary culture, and like I mentioned, drinking soju over grilled meat is a must-do on any trip to Korea. There's also a very specific drinking etiquette, especially when drinking soju with an elder. For example, receiving the drink with both hands and then turning your head away from the table as you sip are part of showing respect. Checking glasses to see if they're empty and then filling them up are also very good soju etiquette. And I'm sure that you all know that Rose's song APT is also inspired by a drinking game, which shows us that soju is also a way for people to have fun while drinking.
So Julian, with K-dramas, K-pop, and other Korean content gaining so much global attention, how has that translated into interest in Korean food and drinking culture, and of course in soju itself?
Yeah, well, in particular, soju has a strong presence in Korean films or dramas when characters experience hardship, pain, loneliness, as well as celebratory occasions. So as more people are consuming Korean content, including K-pop, it has led to overseas fans to take interest in Korean food and drinking culture, driving steady increase in soju exports. Let's take a look at the screen to find out more. Now, soju exports have been growing rapidly, rising from 135 million in 2020 to 182 million in 2022, and last year surpassed $200 million for the first time ever. Now, fruit-flavored soju in particular has been especially popular, contributing to the continued growth in exports. Now, this year, exports of fruit-flavored sojus alone are expected to exceed $100 million. And based on my experience living in the US and now, I also do notice that traditional soju is more popular in Korea, while as fruit-flavored soju is more popular in the US, but that could also just be my own experience too.
So we've been talking about how soju is booming internationally, but interestingly, I've heard that among young people in Korea, especially among millennials and Gen Z, soju consumption is actually going down. So to wrap up our discussion today, why do you think that is, and what does it say about the changing drinking habits here in Korea?
The alcohol consumption culture in Korea is definitely shifting from the traditional let's drink to get wasted idea to let's enjoy drinks in moderation, which I personally like since it leads to just a healthier body and mind overall. In addition, the sober curious or healthy pleasure culture, which prioritizes one's health and well-being over excessive alcohol consumption, is gaining traction. And we're seeing growing awareness of the implications of alcohol-related consequences, which are definitely changing the drinking habits of the younger generation here.
And that's such an interesting shift. It's not just about drinking itself anymore or being able to drink as much as you can, but it's about more of a lifestyle. So we're really seeing this trend of people being more mindful and focused on health and balance. But there's nothing wrong, of course, with drinking in moderation. This doesn't mean people are giving up on drinking altogether. So for people who do enjoy drinking, what has become their choice of drink?
Yes, our generation seems to be more interested in trying a whole variety of alcoholic beverages from all around the world that suits their own personal taste, whether it's hard liquor, beer, mixed drinks, wine. I think people in general are just more open to trying different types of alcohol and figuring out what really matches their style. Now, Grace had just mentioned about no matter what type of alcohol it is, drinking excessively can harm your health. So it is important to enjoy in moderation if you do decide to drink.
Can you also relate to this? What kind of alcohol do you drink? Obviously, I know you're not like an avid drinker.
Well, honestly, I think it depends on what I'm pairing the alcoholic drink with.
I see.
For example, if I'm trying like cheese and crackers, I would like wine, but with grilling meat, soju is probably the best option for that.
Fair enough, fair enough. So from its roots in Korea to its rising status around the world, soju is no longer just a drink, but it's part of a shared cultural experience. And even for those who don't drink, like myself, we can all agree that soju tells a story that's bigger than its green bottle. It's about culture, community, and connection. And as it continues to win over drinkers worldwide, who knows, maybe we'll see Soju Day spread beyond California next. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. We'll be back on Monday, 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and conversations. A big thanks to Grace.
Thanks for having me.
Coming in, as well Julian.
Thank you for also having me today.
And to all our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you have the best weekend. We are News Generation.
Yeah, we got those tropical notes. I've been studying Seoul for over a decade and searching for the perfect pairings. Now, this is one of my favorites.